Okay, so welcome to ClimateAction.tech CAT Salon East. So today it will be slightly be more informal session. So the main idea is first I'll present to something like a brain teaser, something so that the conversation can be leveled, and then later on we'll have a discussion. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Joshua Cortez. I'm a data scientist from the Philippines, and I'm volunteering to organize the ClimateAction.tech CAT Salon for Eastern Philippines. So yeah, hello, and we'll kick off. So this is what we'll discuss today. So first, um, I'll talk about kinds of considerations that you would a person would usually take when considering a climate career. Why, and then why we need to take this on as a community, and then hopefully you can get a really thoughtful, open discussion and sharing later on. Okay, so first is like the imperative, like why are we doing this? So if you signed up for ClimateAction.tech or CAT, then you must have some interest in climate. So I won't into this too long, but of course, the thing about climate change is that the world economy really needs to transition under a very tight deadline so that we can reach a safe level of warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. So if you see the graph on the right, um, what we need to be doing is the dark blue graph at the very bottom. So you see it's actually very, very steep what we need to do right now based on our current policies and actions. We're headed towards a 2.5 to 3 degree level of warming. So there's really a lot to do. And so this is both a massive problem and a job opportunity. Okay, next. So in ClimateAction.tech or CAT, we host these welcome calls so that we could introduce people to the community. And when we analyzed some of the data in what people are looking for, so it's really how to start and how to find a new job. And so it's really at the beginning stage. People are still wondering what to do when or how to start when it comes to um, in this transition. So some career considerations in for anyone. So first, you could be someone who thinks that you could be just effecting change in your own job. So is it change from within, or you could also be looking for another job, so something that's more climate focused. And second, which sectors should I dive in, which organizations? There's just so many different sectors and sometimes it can be quite confusing. And third is, how do I navigate through all this? So there's there's so much information, there's so many possible avenues, but how do I um, find help in navigating through all this? So first is, I'll give some examples for change within the org. So first you have employee activism. So this is this has been happening in some very large uh, tech firms such as Amazon. They formed this group called Amazon Employees for Justice, and they're holding their leaders accountable. And you could also do green investments. You could um, find more sustainable options when it comes to your pension funds or retirement plans. And third, if you are in a position of relative power or influence, you could also affect change by reorienting your whole company strategy and towards climate action. And science-based targets is one of these frameworks that corporations can use to to help create a strategy. So these are just a few examples of what you could be considering when you're affecting change from within. And also, and how about if you're trying to find a new job? So finding an organization that's more directly connected to climate. So there's this very handy resource called Project Drawdown that lists all of the sectors that and ranks them in terms of the potential impact. And of course, the top two that always come to mind are electricity, and then followed by food, agriculture, and land use. This is actually a very long list, and if you're coming off it um, very new, then it can be overwhelming. So personally, for me, it's only after I studied about climate change for a while that I started to really appreciate um, each of these subsectors and how they relate to each other. And this is another um, example of how you could find the ways you can affect impact. So this is the global greenhouse gas emissions by sector. And as you can see, energy is a really big piece of the pie. But even within energy, there's really a lot. So you have industry, transport, and buildings. And then next, you have agriculture, forestry, and land use. So farming, regenerative agriculture, how to deal with livestock. And then you have other components following that. So it's really big. The sector, there's it climate really encompasses everything. And if you try to Google climate tech, or what are the kinds of organizations that are you know into this space, you'll find a lot of things happening. So first, on the left, you'll see my climate journey. So that is it's a podcast and also a community, and almost every week they have interviews with startup CEOs. So you can see that there's a lot of um, companies that are being climate tech companies that are ramping up. And late last year, PwC also released this report on the state of climate tech 2020, and they said that a lot of VC funding has really been pouring in climate tech um, it's really been pouring into climate tech, and it's been the rate of investment is actually quite higher than other investments like AI. And you also have this resource called Climate Tech Venture Capital, which is also a weekly newsletter that discusses everything that's happening. And you can see that there's also a lot of investment firms that are into this space. It's so in general, there's really a lot going on. And one thing that I want to really talk about is the importance of navigating through this as a community. And I watched this talk by Catherine Wilkinson, one of the heads of this book and also this project called the All We Can Save project. And one thing that really inspired me was when she, oh, I'll go back, was when she said that, can you imagine that the community that will heal the climate crisis, it will not be just you, it will not be a technological solution, salvation, it will be all of us. So she really emphasized the value of community. And as a technologist myself, being as a data scientist, that is quite sobering. So one of the things that I really had to learn in my transition phases is that we cannot simply Iron Man our way out of the climate crisis. We cannot simply rely on technological solutions alone. It surely tech, of course, has its part, but we also need community um, in addressing the climate crisis. And in terms of communities, you see a lot of them popping up online. So of course you have here we are in ClimateAction.tech, but there's also other communities such as Work on Climate, which really focuses on um, more on the career aspect, and you also have Terra.do, which is also a boot camp for learning about the landscape of climate change. And you also have My Climate Journey, which aside from being a podcast, it also is a community which has a lot of the entrepreneurs and investors. And aside from that, something that I recently found out was climate pathfinders for transition. So this, what they do is, or what this um, series of meetups is trying to do is trying to help people transition into the climate space. So for people who are interested, um, this is happening also weekly, and it's also about transitioning. So you may be interested in signing up for this. So yeah, so and just to, before we jump into the open discussion, what I really want to, this is this is one of the reasons why I um, wanted a conversation in the CAT Salon East. So one of the things I noticed in my own transition is that there's not much representation from the East and the global South in, in the conversations in climate tech, and I think that matters because the opportunities from people in the East are quite different. So um, even if we're looking for remote jobs, it's still kind of tricky. So because a lot, you see a lot of these job postings, they say, oh, we're only looking to hire within the US or only within the UK, and there's not much action. There's, at least for now, there's not much action that I'm seeing in in the Eastern and the global South. And also the local context is different within the country. So for example, in the Philippines, resilience and adaptation takes a real sense of urgency because you're really hit with typhoons, and typhoons are getting stronger in the past few years. So this is one example to show why the perspective may be different from the East and the global South. So this is a the contribution of CO2 emissions, historical CO2 emissions per country. And you know, me personally looking at this, I was looking for the Philippines, and it was this really tiny box in in this um, in the right side. And you know, looking at that, it kind of feels being in an awkward space because we're not emitting that much, but that doesn't mean also that we shouldn't be emitting. So of course we should be closing our coal plants, but as an individual, I'm not really sure where to go because for one, our um, emissions aren't that high. Number two, adaptation is important. And number three, the opportunities aren't really as abundant. So kind of stuck in a weird spot. And I was hoping if there are any people here from who could relate to that experience. And lastly, one of the observations that I was seeing is a lot of the, if you go through some of the communities, the podcasts, the newsletters they have online, a lot of the discourse is centering on entrepreneurs, on investors, and employees in the biggest tech companies. So the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles. And I was really wondering, how is the discourse like for people who are not from these kinds of backgrounds? So people who are early to mid career, working in tech, working in small to mid sized companies. And I was wondering if there is a long a long tail, an untapped long tail. So what my hypothesis is that there is a small group of people who are dominating the conversations, and for good reason, because they have a lot of investment, they have a lot of funding, a lot of influence. But how about the long tail? The long tail is a lot of the people who may not be coming from these backgrounds but are also eager in trying to do climate action. And I was really wondering, how does this long tail exist? And if it exists, how would the conversation be different? And if it does exist, how could we organize ourselves towards, finding our way in this transition? So So yeah, after that, I just want to open the virtual floor up to any discussions, any thoughts. And I realize that a lot of our audience here comes from the UK or within Europe. And but regardless, I'm open to all ideas. I want you to share your thoughts on anything that I've said so far.